This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community, episode 100. I'm Nancy Ree.
And I'm Harold Ree.
Today's guest is Andrea Jordan, digital nomad, entrepreneur, and you can find her at LearnDiscoverBeFree.com.
So now we're at episode 100. Yay!
Yay!
What does episode 100 mean to you?
We worked really hard.
Well, we did work really hard, and we are super excited that we achieved this milestone. We look forward to the rest of this year and many more interesting guests. Andrea Jordan's from New Zealand, but that only tells part of the story. As Nancy mentioned, she's a digital nomad, and you'll have to listen to the episode to see how animal rescue fits into the story. If you'd like to learn more about Andrea Jordan and LearnDiscoverBeFree.com, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/100. That's the number 100. Your business, it's called LearnDiscoverBeFree.com. How'd you get those three words into your brain?
Well, it was actually through a book that I read. Mr. Livingstone Seagull, I think is what the book's called. And it's kind of, I guess you'd call it a self-help book, but just one of those books to make you think. And there was a phrase in that book that caught my eye, and I liked the idea of having three words. And I looked, I think, at Mark Twain's work. I think he had explore, dream, explore, discover, something along those lines. And through the combination of that quote and that book, I came up with four words to describe my website.
So if you're going to describe to someone what your business is all about, what would you say?
I'm a business strategist, and I work with early stage entrepreneurs in the first 1 to 3 years of business. And I work with them to get their businesses up and running and designed in a way that their business supports their lifestyle. And also I work with them to make sure that they've got the right systems in place so that they're not overwhelmed by the day-to-day work. That's in a nutshell.
Where would you say most of your clients tend to come from geographically?
I have clients just from all over the world. That's what I love about technology. I ran a course recently about for people who are starting blogging for their business. And I had someone from Israel, someone from Canada, New Zealand, Australia, someone from the States, just everywhere. It fascinates me when I see where people are from.
And when I think of Learn, Discover, and Be Free and know a little bit about your own personal story, it sounds like you're actually trying to live that mantra, right? The Learn, Discover, Be Free part. You wanna explain a little bit to our audience?
Definitely, yes. That name also does describe my life to a large extent these days. I started out my career in the world of corporate law, and I was a lawyer for 17 odd years. I worked firstly in New Zealand, that's where I'm from, and then I had 8 years working in London. And as I climbed that corporate ladder, I realized that it wasn't something that was going to make me happy in the long term. So I changed course, did a lot of soul searching, and retrained as a coach. And from there, did a lot of thinking about how I wanted my life to look. And I've always had a love of learning, and I love to travel and explore new places. And I also love the idea of having a lot of freedom in my life, and working for myself definitely gives me that freedom.
You want to tell maybe folks where you are actually dialing in from?
Right now, I'm in Buenos Aires in Argentina. I have been here for, about a month. For the first week, I pet sat a cat named Pumpkin, which name always makes me laugh. And then I rented an apartment for another month. Since May, I've actually been traveling throughout Latin America, basing myself in each of the countries I'm visiting for at least a month, in some cases 2 or 3 months. And that's what I'm doing for the foreseeable future.
That is wonderful. And in fact, my wife, son, and I, we were just in Costa Rica last week. So we're not necessarily following your game plan, but we were in your sort of general vicinity, so to speak.
Fabulous. I went to Costa Rica for the first time last year. I wasn't in the country for very long. I got distracted by going to Nicaragua and then came straight down to Argentina. But I love what I saw, and I'd love to go back again and spend some time on the beaches and in the national parks there.
So how many countries did you travel to in 2016?
Let's see. I started off in New Zealand, and then Los Angeles was my first stop. Rather interestingly, I guess, I was part of a salsa performance team when I was in New Zealand, and we'd been together for about 5 years. And we were invited to perform in Los Angeles at what is the world's largest salsa festival. It was sort of the last hurrah for our team because our teachers and various people were going traveling and going to live overseas for a while. So Los Angeles was my first stop. From there, the team had a few days in Mexico together, and then we went to Cuba, which was an amazing place. I'd highly recommend people go there if they can. After Cuba, the team all went their separate ways. So I went back to Mexico and was there for 2 months, then to Guatemala, then Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and down to Argentina.
That is amazing. How do you leverage technology to manage your business and be able to have that location freedom?
Well, using various tools, really. Skype is a fantastic tool. So when I do one-to-one sessions with my clients, they're generally over Skype, and that's fantastic. And I use a calendar scheduling tool, an online tool. And what I really like about the tool is it connects through to my calendar, but when someone goes to book a time, the available times in my diary show up in their time zone. So that's fantastic because it stops that emailing back and forth trying to figure out which times suit us. And then there's a whole raft of tools that I use in terms of social media and being able to schedule out social media so that my images, say, of the rescue dogs that I take photos of, and my posts for my business strategy business are going out regardless of whether I can actually be near a computer, because sometimes the places I go to don't have very good internet or I'm traveling. So I use a whole raft of tools these days, and it's just fantastic, the tools you can find that people have invented.
Before we move on to your animal rescue story, if someone is just super inspired by your own experience and decides to think to him or herself, you know what, I want to do what Andrea Jordan does. I want to be able to run a business where I can live anywhere, I can live the life the way I want to. What's sort of the biggest decision that someone should be thinking of before they go forward with this journey?
I think the biggest decision is to decide what you want your lifestyle to look like, because we are all such different creatures. And while what I'm doing may sound exciting to some people, it won't suit others. And I have some clients who love to travel, but they also want to have a home base in their home country. So they will travel during their winter and be away from home for 3 or 4 months and then go home to work. And that suits them really, really well. Other people I know who work like I do, they move around much more than I do. Like every week or so, they move locations, which for me is just, I don't want to be doing that. I love being based in one place for a while. So I think having a really good look at what excites you about traveling and getting really clear on how you would actually like your everyday to look while you're traveling.
All right. Well, let's move on to your animal rescue story. Obviously, we're an animal rescue podcast. So tell us a little bit about your experience with animals and what you do to spread the message of animal rescue.
My animal rescue story, I think, came about a few years ago when I was actually going on a holiday with a friend in Thailand. And she's a fabulous researcher. And she came up with the idea to go to the Elephant Nature Park, which is in Thailand, and you can volunteer there for a week and care for the elephants. As it turned out, in the end, she couldn't make it, but I still went. And that really started my volunteering, because as much as I loved working with the elephants, I mean, that was fabulous. Just down the road, there was a dog rescue shelter. And I used to go down there in my spare time because they had very few volunteers and so many dogs. And I really loved it. I loved being able to spend time with the dogs. And it was incredible to see the effect that human contact had on them, because I think they had a couple of hundred dogs there, but not so many volunteers to actually just go in and sit and socialize with the dogs. And that really got me interested in the kind of volunteer work that I could do. And then from there, I've volunteered basically every year. The first 2 years after that, I went back to Thailand to a different shelter. And then I've also been volunteering. I volunteered in New Zealand for a summer, and then started volunteering while I'm traveling in Latin America as well.
How do you find the shelters to volunteer in?
Basically Google searches. The one I found in Thailand in Chiang Mai, I read someone's blog post about the Elephant Nature Park where I'd been, and they also mentioned this other shelter, Care for Dogs. And that just started my investigation. I emailed them with a few questions and basically went from there. And that's the way I do it these days. I look on Facebook, see if they've got a Facebook page, and then generally just Google to see if I can find the shelter, and then find if anyone's written about their experiences being at the shelter.
In those times that you volunteered, can you think of any particular animals who have really inspired you or who you connected with?
Oh, so many. Yeah, there are still dogs back in the shelter in Thailand that if it was easier to bring dogs into New Zealand, I would bring with me. When I was in Thailand, they had 200 dogs that they cared for, and definitely firm favourites. One called Oscar, they're all a bit of a mix, but he's got a bit of Rhodesian in him, as well as some wiry-haired mix. And he's just a fabulous dog. Every time I'd arrive at the shelter, he'd be over like a shot to the door. I'd like to go for a walk, please. I'll be the first one. Yeah, there is so many dogs there. I can just picture all the beauties. Yeah, there are definitely dogs that I've just fallen in love with at each of the shelters that I've worked in.
Wow. Now, like a dog like Oscar, is Oscar ever going to get adopted, or will it be a situation where you tend to see him year after year after year?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky in Thailand. One thing, they don't like to adopt black dogs. Oscar's not a black dog, but they tend to have a bit of a superstition about them being bad luck. So if a black puppy is not adopted very smartly, those dogs will probably be in the shelter for life. Oscar is a bigger dog, so someone might adopt him if they think that they want a guard dog, because he just, might look a little scary even though he's a big softie. But some of those dogs will stay in that shelter for the rest of their days, unfortunately, because there simply aren't enough people to adopt the number of dogs that are there.
Well, thanks for sharing that. What are some of the ways that now that you've traveled and experienced animal rescue in different countries, what are some of the, best practices that you'd like to share that you may have witnessed yourself?
In terms of what the shelters do?
Yeah, I guess in terms of, either how the shelters treat the animals or just in terms of how well a shelter's run, anything that you've observed, maybe even your own business mind, anything that you've observed that other shelters might want to know about?
What really needs to happen between the humans is there needs to be really good communication between the volunteers and the staff that are there permanently. And we will have quite different roles in terms of what we do day to day. I'm thinking in Thailand in particular, because the volunteers are there really to walk the dogs and socialize with the dogs, which the staff don't do simply because they don't have the time to do that. They're in the office arranging adoptions and surgeries and what have you. And there needs to be really good communication between the humans to make sure that the dogs are looked after in the right way. The volunteers are more likely to notice if a dog perhaps has been in a fight because they're out walking them every day, whereas the staff simply won't notice that kind of thing because they don't have the time to be doing what the volunteers are doing. So I think that's one big thing that shelters can work on, is to make sure that the volunteers are kept up to date with what's going on in the shelter, and also are made to feel valued. Volunteering can be quite a tough thing to do. You have to see a lot of dogs who are in poor condition, and not all of us are used to that. So if there is just a bit of encouragement to make sure that the volunteers are feeling valued, then I think that can go a long way. And I'm thinking of that in New Zealand as well. They run shelters very differently, and there are an incredible amount of rules there. But one thing I noticed where I was is that they didn't really make the volunteers feel like they were welcome all the time, which was a little bit of an odd situation. So I think that makes a huge difference to how shelters are run, because if the humans are all happy, then they've got more time and energy to be helping with the dogs.
That's very important, right? I think you mentioned two key points. One is the communication, and the other one to me is, and tell me if you agree with this, it's sort of like the mindset, right? If we as people can be happy, that just makes the experience for everybody, both human and animal, that much more positive.
Oh, definitely, because I mean, dogs in particular, because they're the animals I work with most, they pick up on your mood very quickly. You can't have a disagreement with a human in one room and then walk out into a shelter with 100 dogs and not expect them to know that something was going on. You need to take a breath before you go in with the dogs. And if you ever feel even grumpy with a dog, like some dogs are just pains in the backside. They jump up all over you and tip over the food you're trying to feed them with. But you can't get angry with them because it's not helpful. You need to find other ways to deal with misbehaving animals. So yeah, I think you're completely right. It is very much a mindset thing.
Yeah. Any countries that so far have stood out to you as far as, like, I don't know, I'm just trying to think, if someone wants a great combination of relaxation with a wonderful volunteering experience, any countries or particular situations that really stand out to you?
I think where I was in Mexico would be a great mix for a lot of people, because it's the area I was in was called Playa del Carmen, and it's quite a touristy area, which is not everyone's cup of tea, but it does mean that if you're not used to traveling or maybe not used to volunteering, it's got a lot of the home comforts, I'll say, that would make it a lot easier transition for people. Plus the beach is right there.
Yeah, it's about, 30 minutes south of Cancun? Maybe something like that? Or
Yeah, 30, 40 minutes away. And the beach is right there, and you can go paddle boarding and you can do all sorts of wonderful things when you're not volunteering. But the shelter I worked with there is not very hard to get to. There's not a huge amount of dogs, sort of 40 or so you can actually get to know all of the dogs. So that could be a really nice combination for people. So that would be one place I'd recommend. And then in Chiang Mai in Thailand, where I volunteered quite a bit, that's another place that can be a wonderful experience. You can stay close to where the shelter is. It's a little bit out of Chiang Mai, or you can stay in Chiang Mai itself and then travel down to the shelter. So that's, and again, Chiang Mai has quite a few expats. So that's advantageous in things like internet connection. It's really, really good up there. And the places to eat there, there are so many, and the food is fantastic. So that would definitely be another place that would be a great shelter to go to.
Two amazing recommendations: Playa del Carmen in Mexico and Chiang Mai in Thailand. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. What does 2017 look like for you? I don't know, whether it's travel-wise or business-wise.
Yeah, I'm going through my planning at the moment. So let's see, travel-wise, for the foreseeable future, I'll be in Latin America. all going well, this time next week, I'm going to travel to Uruguay, and I'll be there again for another month or so, and then come back to Argentina. I want to head down into Patagonia and do some hiking down there. And then after that, it's very much open. I'd love to go up to Bolivia and Peru and Ecuador. But what I find is I don't really like to plan too far in advance, because if I'm in a place that I really love, I'd like to just stay there longer rather than feeling I have to get on a flight at a certain time because I've booked it months ahead. So I have a general idea of where I'll be, sort of say March, but I won't necessarily book anything right now. So that's where I am travel-wise. And then business-wise, it's more of the same great stuff. Finding people who are starting their businesses so I can work with them, helping people who are new to blogging. I'll be running my Kick Your Start Your Business blog course again. And then I'm developing a new course around people just taking action. One thing I notice in business is that we have a tendency to procrastinate and overthink things, and we never really quite get started. So I'm developing a course of just 30 days where you have one project and you get stuck in and have accountability, and me keeping an eye on you just to make sure that you're not getting too distracted by social media or any of the other crazy things that life has going on.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So one question that comes to mind is how do you tend to find your places to live? I'm talking about like how, for example, how did you choose Uruguay, for example? Sometimes
it's because friends recommend them. So I might be talking to someone in Mexico, for example, who said, you've got to go to Nicaragua. It's an absolutely beautiful place. And it wasn't on my list at all because I wasn't sure if it was safe for solo women travelers. But as it turns out, it was completely fine. So sometimes it is just a random conversation with people. Other times I'll be sitting down and with a Lonely Planet and just be looking through and seeing what grabs my eye. South America is somewhere I've wanted to come to for years. So I've had a general idea of, places that I want to see. Uruguay was another one of those places when I looked at the map and went, gosh, it's really close to Argentina. I could just pop across the border. And as it turns out, two friends of mine who are also digital nomads are going to be there at the same time I am. So that'll be wonderful because I can have conversations in English.
Beautiful, beautiful. And then in general, how do you actually find your actual lodging?
So a combination of house sitting. I house sit where I can, and I'm on a couple of house sitting platforms and Facebook groups where I hear about house sits. And then Airbnb is a godsend. It certainly wasn't around when I first started traveling way back in 1995. And that's just wonderful because it means that I can rent an apartment like the one I'm in now for a month. And usually if you're somewhere in a city, it's quite hard to find month-long rentals, but Airbnb is brilliant for being able to do that.
Any resources for the house sitting that you might recommend?
Sometimes it depends on the country you're in. Like for New Zealand, Kiwi house sitters is by far the best that I've found. And yeah, so I think it does depend on where people want to go to, but then there are ones like I'm on Trusted House Sitters. Now it's a great platform and it's worldwide, but because it's so popular, there are a lot of people on there. So sometimes it can be a bit competitive to find the house sits. And yeah, so that would be another good one to get started on.
Well, thank you. When you think about animal rescue in general, if you had that magic wand, what do you think you would do to improve the state of animal rescue around the world?
Gosh, I would sterilize every street dog I could get my hands on. Yeah, I think one of the big things is that you've got the dogs that are out on the street, and they're making puppies all the time. So that population number just keeps creeping up and up. So when I actually look at shelters, I always make sure that they have some kind of sterilization program in place. Either they do the work themselves, or they have a relationship with vets, because that's really important to me, that the population numbers come down so that the dogs that are in shelters have a much higher chance of being adopted. If you don't deal with the population growth, then you really are spinning your wheels when it comes to animal rescue.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, let's give folks the opportunity to really connect with you. What's the best way to find you? What's the best way to sign up for any of your upcoming webinar series?
They can find me on LearnDiscoverBeFree.com. So if they've got any questions about volunteering or business in general, they can use the contact form and simply send me an email. I'm also on Facebook, so I'm pretty easy to find there. I have one page under my name, Andrea Jordan, Business Strategist. And then I also have a Facebook page, Andrea Jordan Photography. And that's where I share the photos that I take of all the rescue dogs and of some of my travels as well.
When's your next big course, the online course that you're offering?
I'm doing a mini course for people who are planning for 2017, and that's a free course that I run, and that's actually starting this Thursday on the 5th of January. So that is my next date, and then once that course has finished after the 5 days, then I'll be releasing dates for the other courses that I have. But if people are interested in those courses, they can always email me and I can keep them in touch as to when the dates are finalized.
Okay. Wow. Amazing stuff here. So in general, do you call yourself a digital nomad, or if someone were to ask you, what would you say?
Yeah, I do call myself that, although it's a funny kind of phrase. I think I call myself that just because people are starting to know what that actually means these days. If you look at my, say, Instagram profile, then digital nomad is mentioned, because there are some people who are also digital nomads who might want to volunteer, and so they'll know that I get what their lifestyle is about. Yeah, I would describe myself as a digital nomad.
As we wrap up, anything else that you'd like to share, either about yourself or about animal rescue?
I think about animal rescue is that people can make more of a difference than they realize. For example, in the Mexican shelter where I am, if people are on holiday there, they have a charm school on Saturdays, and you can go along just for the morning and walk the dogs and spend time with the dogs. And you may not think that makes much of a difference, but it really does. Those dogs get a walk that they may not have got otherwise. They get introduced to lots of different people, which are going to increase their adoption rates. So I always think, if you're keen on volunteering in some way, don't feel that you have to do this massive, big commitment when you're traveling or when you're at home. You might be able to do something that is much smaller, but actually has a really big impact for the animals. So don't be discouraged if you don't have a lot of time to be volunteering. Check around and see what you can do with the amount of time that you have, because every little bit really does help.
We want to say thank you to Andrea Jordan for sharing her story. She actually took the time to type up her own show notes. So if you want to see her amazing show notes and her spectacular animal photography, go to thisispawprint.com/100. We also want to say thank you to Rebecca Nemeth. She connected us with our guest from last week, Debo Zarco, and also connected us with Andrea. So thank you, Rebecca. If you want to meet me or Nancy on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you can find us at This Is Paw Print, all one word. If you'd like to listen to more episodes of Paw Print, you can find us on your favorite podcast app like iTunes, SoundCloud, and Overcast. Look for Paw Print Animal Rescue and make sure to hit subscribe to get the latest episodes immediately. Stay tuned for next week's episode with Patrick Major and his dog, Sammy Davis. It's a wonderful story of who rescued whom. And finally, Nancy and I want to thank you, our listeners, for helping us get to episode 100. We truly could not have done it without you. Thanks for sharing Paw Print with your friends and family. And remember, you spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone. And see you next time on Paw
Paw Print is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.